After studying computer science at university, Liam Neeson, for a while, became a forklift truck driver.
Hello and welcome to the Gandalf's Fist podcast. My name is Dean.
And I am Luke.
We are a progressive rock band from the UK, but we don't just like rocking out, we also like nerding out. And today we're here to talk about superhero movies. You lucky sausages.
We are absolutely not talking about superhero movies, Dean. The word you are looking for is
what?
Comic book movies.
Comic book movies.
Comic books. See, this is the misconception a lot of people have. This is me going proper deep dive nerd here. I'm probably right. So, comic books, yes, historically, mainly about superheroes. So if you go back to the history of comic books, which I'm not going to do, but basically you've got Superman. He was kind of the first. Then you've got Batman, and then Marvel kind of got in the action. You've got Captain America and all that kind of thing going on in the Second World War. Banana Man later, but then you've got like the what they call, so that's the Golden Age, and then you've got the Silver Age, and then you've got like the Spider-Man, the Daredevil, and obviously you've got all the Justice League kind of going on at DC, and then you've got like the more recent stuff. The X-Men kind of came along in the 70s and 80s, but in reality, that's quite a saturated market. In reality, what do we, two nerds who actually, have... You're not a comic book nerd, are you, Dean?
So, like, full disclosure, you are, but I'm not. And that is, I think, not out of choice. It's just pure circumstantial sort of thing. I lived a very rural life as a young boy. I lived literally on the beach with no, like, kids for, like, miles and miles and miles and miles and miles around.
Your friends with the fishes and the sticks, basically.
Yeah, there was nothing. It was isolated. And there was villages and towns and stuff, and the nearest city would be Carlisle and things like that. At my primary school was in a place where there was two buildings in the village, the primary school and a church, and we used to go and eat our lunch in the church.
Wow.
There was my entire primary school, there was 30 kids in the entire school. There was two buildings. Well, there was 3 rooms in the entire school. There was like the infants, so everyone up until the age of like, I don't know,
5
was in one room, and then everybody up till the age of 10 was in the other room, and then the only other room that was there was like the toilets.
Wow.
And it was an old Victorian sandstone building in the middle of nowhere. So like there was 2 other people in my year. So there was nothing really around. I couldn't buy comic books anywhere. I didn't even know they were a thing, So we had every week, me and my brother used to get, like, the only experience I had of like quote unquote comics was like the Beano and the Dandy. Like I would get the Dandy and my brother would get the Beano. We would read them and we would swap. So that was my own, like, that was all you could get out of the newsagents. You couldn't go into like anywhere and buy like a Spider-Man or whatever, So there was literally no exposure to this kind of thing. If I was living in somewhere where there was, like, I walked past a comic book store or somewhere that did comic books, like even Carlisle, which is the only city in Cumbria, there was nothing like that there. There really was nothing. Like, I can remember going to Carlisle. They had like two fast food restaurants. They had a Wimpy and a Burger King. There was no McDonald's there. There was no KFC, nothing like that, So it was like, even though it was a city, it wasn't like tooled up like the rest of the cities around the UK with the sort of things that you would expect from a city, Like the most exciting thing in Carlisle was Laser Quest. I went there every birthday for a few years.
So my exposure is different. I've got an older brother. So my brother was born 74. So he was kind of getting, so I had a lot of old annuals around in like my house. So I was born in 81, so by the time I was like starting to read in like 85, I guess 84, 85, I was reading things that were like 6-7 years old. So my brother had a Spider-Man annual from 79 that had kind of quite a big impact on me. I think he had a dandy, and I think there was like another one. There was a Beano, a dandy, and a something else, and there was another one, and that we had that in our house. But the big thing that my brother had was the Commando comics, which were like the big kind of World War II or that kind of thing. So it was Battle and Commando, I think they were. That was a big part of kind of thing. I mean, bearing in mind, I grew up in an era where the Falklands War had happened just before my lifetime. That was kind of a big thing. And then obviously in my like early kind of, I was 10 when like kind of Gulf War happened. So it's all that kind of, that kind of thing. And we've talked about films and stuff in the past, but like films that were on, like my dad and my brother were very much into, A Bridge Over the River Kwai and, those kind of, The Great Escape. World War II movies were very much on my kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the Spider-Man annual had a massive impact on me. To this day, Spider-Man is still my favorite. I'm actually wearing a Spider-Man t-shirt. I'm shitting you not. But Spider-Man had a massive, massive impact on me as a kid. And I had this Spider-Man annual. It got Spider-Man crossover with the Fantastic Four, and there was Mysterio in it. Obviously, it was in like not the recent Spider-Man movies in the last one. So I had a funny relationship, but you say I wasn't a frequent, comic reader until I was, a young adult. I was probably 17, 18 when I started like getting comics on a regular basis.
Just to jump in what you were saying about the Commando things there, like I just had a flashback. So when I used to go every so often and go and visit my nan in Burnley, which was where my dad was originally from. And so like the only toys that she had there were like the toys that my dad used to play with in the like 50s into the 60s, I guess. And so the books and toys and everything there were like just from that era. And on the bookcase there was just like from the 60s era Commando comics when they were in like a little book. Like not like A4 size, what you would like get on.
Oh
like
no, they were the Commando comics that we used to read. They were exactly that size. They were like a half A4, like an A5 size almost.
They seemed very exciting. I can remember being very excited by them, but they seem very like propaganda-y and very very sort of. I guess that sort of laid the groundwork for all the G.I. Joe stuff to come later on. I guess
Well, no, you say that, but like. I have vivid memories of like the Germans being called the Hun, even in the World War II comics, in the Commando comics, the Germans were always referred to as the Hun, and all that kind of thing. But so that's kind of that. So skip to me being like 19, 20, I got massively into that element of comics and that kind of thing. And I didn't just read I'm a Marvel boy. I've never really got into the DC. I've never really, as much as I loved, we talked in a couple of episodes ago about Batman and how much I like Batman. And I love the Batman character. I love all the Batman films, but I never got into the Batman comics. For me, it was always Spider-Man, and then there was an introduction to the Avengers and that world. And then obviously that has spiraled astronomically into the fact that the highest grossing movies of all time now are just comic book movie after comic book movie after comic book movie. But I don't want to talk about any of those because that's not exciting. What I want to talk about is the comic book movies that from the past, or maybe from the recent past, that are comic book movies. Maybe people don't realize comic book movies, or they're comic book movies that are good, or I think they're good, or some of them are not great, but let's talk about them anyway. But they're not the big two. They're not DC. They're not Marvel. They're other properties.
Forget your Spider-Man. Forget your Superman. Forget your Batman. Anyone mentions Fantastic Four can fuck right off.
I thought you were going to break into. Sorry, just randomly. Do you remember Supergran?
Oh,
from the 80s.
Right. Supergran. Yes, and I guess we might alienate some people here who were either like too young or too old to remember,
or don't live in the UK.
I don't live in the UK, and I don't know where it was broadcast because I've talked to people about Supergran like at work and stuff, and everyone's like sort of like looked at me like I've been like explaining a fever dream. And Supergran was filmed in the northeast of England, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the main character was Scottish, right?
Yes. So it was a Scottish woman old elderly Scottish woman who obtained superpowers and could just do like everything, like this Superman's powers. There's powers apart from flying. She could do what Superman could do.
The main one I remember, she used to do some hellish backflips.
Yes,
that was my kind of
Stuntable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the main thing I remember from Supergran is the intro music.
Yes, which is
performed
what
by
Go on.
Billy Connolly.
Really? I don't know
Billy
that.
Connolly, the Glaswegian comedian. He did the theme music to Supergran. You know the Stand Back Superman.
Do you reckon we could play it without getting copyright? And nobody's going to care about that, do we? Anyway, let's play the Supergran theme tune.
And if not, I'll sing it.
Is there nothing that she can't do?
On your mic, Wonder Woman, let's just say you had a coming. This one is for real. Charlie's Angels pack it in before it gets embarrassing. The lady's solid steel. She comes on strong like the Bengal Lancer. She makes you all look like a bunch of chancers. Hang about, look out for Supergran. Hang about, look out for Supergran.
That's your big.
That's my granny up there on that bike with wings. You see that?
Lady good.
You see these wee lumps in her stocking? That's muscles.
Good. She's a rotten yarn, that's what she is.
That's my granny. Plays football as well. Yeah. Dances like a...
There we go.
So you just listened or not to the Supergran theme tune. My favourite line in that is, "Don't want to cause a ruckus with B.A. Baracus."
Linking into some meta 18 crossover.
So here's the thing, right? My sister and her husband live near Whitley Bay, and a house on their street is Supergran's house.
No, you fucking shitting me.
Like not like the house where the actress lives or something. It is the house they filmed for like for Supergran, the TV series.
Fuck. Sorry, that's that. I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah.
Honestly, anybody under 30 is have absolutely fucking no idea. This is like the Matrix thing, dude. Anybody under 19 doesn't know what the Matrix is. But anybody under 33 has no idea what we're talking about.
I had a VHS of this. And I had some random like kids TV show VHSs, like really weird like collection of like videos, like Supergran, and like I had some Transformers VHSs, and loads of like movies that based off their like.
Do you remember Grot Bags?
Yeah,
similar era.
Grot Bags. I know a few people in real life that look like Grot Bags. Whenever I see, you know what? Whenever I see somebody who looks like Grot Bags, I can't resist saying to whoever's near me, like, "Don't she remind you of Grot Bags?" I can't resist it. And usually they go, Who's Grot Bags?
Exactly. I have a very vivid memory of there was a thing in Nottingham when I was a kid. Well, it's still going now. Like 700 years apparently. You know, Goose Fair, which is like the big fun fair that comes to Nottingham every October. And I have one vivid memory of the late 80s, early 90s of Grot Bags being at Goose Fair, and we missed it. And I saw it on like ITV News. I was, Grot Bags at Goose Fair. I want to go, and that kind of thing. But anyway, that's my
just
Grot
as an
Bags
aside,
story.
while we're talking about fairs and carnivals and stuff, Maryport Carnival, West Cumbria, one of the most famous people we had from the TV at Maryport Carnival. It wasn't Grot Bags. Let me tell you, it was. It was Wolf from Gladiators.
Wow.
Who just wear his normal clothes and did not get out of a car. He was driven around just in like the back of like a hatchback or whatever, and he just looked through the window and waved like a hairy queen, and that was it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway.
That's a hell of a tangent we just took there, Dean. I have to confess.
I think a worthwhile tangent.
Anyway, Dean, what are we talking about?
We're talking about not superhero movies. We're talking about comic book movies.
Thank you, podcast man.
We're discounting the famous ones. So we're not talking about Iron Man. We're not talking about, the Green Lantern.
Holy
hell.
We might.
So, and we're not necessarily talking about superheroes. We're talking about graphic novels and other comic books that have made it into cinematic territories. Although I think I want to talk about some lesser known superheroes, and I will probably show my ignorance by not knowing if they are DC, Marvel, or other. Okay. I mean, technically, there is some big franchises that I was blissfully unaware even started as comic books. So let's kick things off with a pick from the resident expert of this particular podcast. Luke, what do you want to talk about?
I'm going to go left field. I want to talk about Tank Girl.
I knew you were going to mention Tank Girl.
Now, the reason I mention this is I have seen this film prior. I haven't seen this film in 20 years, like genuinely. So I don't have a recent history with it. But an ex-flame of mine was very much Team Tank Girl. I love this film. I haven't seen it in a long time. I think if I watched it now, I would absolutely love it again. Based on a comic book. The main thing that I remember is that the super soldiers, as is a famous trope now with the whole Marvel universe, the super soldiers in the Tank Girl universe, because it's set in Australia, are crossbred with kangaroos. So it's kangaroo super soldiers. This film is insane. Absolutely insane.
When did this film come out? When did it come out?
92 or 93. So it's right in the it's in the tail kind of grunge era, and it definitely shows. It's very much a kind of it's got that feeling. It's set in that kind of weird kind of Mad Max kind of style world.
Definitely.
It's very surreal. It's got elements of the surrealism of the Super Mario Brothers. It's that kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's just a mental film. But actually, would I say it's a good film? I don't know. I was looking today. It gets itself in the top 20 of comic book movie adaptations. I'm not entirely certain how. I mean, on watching it in a modern day, comparing it to other modern movies, it's probably not great. But it has a special place in my heart for being just a mental movie based on a comic book. And the comic books, the thing is, it's quite true to the comic book, because the comic book's mental as well. So I have read that.
Well, I can remember renting this from the VHS store, and I can remember being lured in by the cover art.
Well, she's a Harley Quinn kind of girl, isn't she? She's a kind of blonde bombshell, pigtails, kind of that kind of thing. Big kind of steampunk kind of tank commander goggles kind of going on.
So whenever it came out, I can remember getting it, renting it, watching it, and I completely did not absorb a single thing about it. I haven't watched it since, but I I have not remembered a single damn
No,
thing. No,
100%. I genuinely, I had a quick Google of it earlier, but it genuinely has a special place in my heart as one of those mental movies that could only have been made in the early 90s, because nobody in their right mind is greenlighting this now. Like,
no. So there was like a bit of a dark sort of period for like superhero like movies or comic book movies. They're like, obviously, like things had a big, like with the Superman, Christopher Reeve Superman things were a huge success in the late 70s. And then in the 80s, you had the Batman with the success. And then once you sort of got into the 90s, it was not really the done thing, really, for like comic book movies.
Superheroes were really unpopular for a long time. And there's lots of like, there's lots of podcasts and lots of like YouTube commentaries about all the things about people swapping, people buying Spider-Man for, a handful of peanuts and a Big Mac or whatever. But like genuinely, people were trading characters for nothing because they were worthless, because nobody could, the technology wasn't there. So you go back to 93, we talked about this past, and Jurassic Park, the work that they did with that, and then Toy Story, the follow, like in like 94, 95, they were groundbreaking. The things that you could do and the things that those films could show you that they could do, that opened up doors for, the later films in the later 90s. I think the Spider-Mans were the early 2000s. Blade is one that's kind of like sticks in my mind. I think that was 98.
Yes.
Blade's a Marvel character. He's a very much a thing, but that wasn't a comic book movie, but it's a comic book character told in a way that, and the special effects on that are great. I mean, I think some of the stuff's good. The kind of burning effects and the skull effects are great, but the bit at the end where, the character gets filled with, we talked about in the last episode about the time cop thing. It's that similar thing where something becomes kind of amorphous blob, and kind of explodes. That effect wasn't great. I've watched that recently, and that's not a good film anymore. But that's genuinely like, that was kind of like the first. Blade was the first of the modern. That was before X-Men. That was before Spider-Man. Blade was the first of the modern comic book movies.
You didn't really need that many special effects, But basically, it's a man killing vampires with a sword. And yes, they jazzed it up with some of those amorphous blob things. But for like most superheroes, you need to see them doing superhuman things, flying,
swinging on ropes,
walls, swinging on ropes, shooting lasers out their eyes. And like for some of that stuff, like the first Superman movie with Christopher Reeve, like they selling it on the fact that the big tagline was the movie.
You can believe a man can fly.
Exactly. But they didn't know how they were going to do it. Like, there's loads of test footage of they tried just drawing it as a cartoon, and then they tried creating a remote control aeroplane dressed up as Superman and stuff like that. So and even though those Spider-Man movies were in the early 2000s and stuff, you have full CGI characters dead. It's with Spider-Man swinging around.
I think we talked in a couple of episodes ago about the like I mentioned about Pirates of the Caribbean, but there's a moment in that first Spider-Man movie where Spider-Man's running across the rooftops, and it doesn't look like a real person. It just takes me out of the movie. Absolutely, just takes me out of the movie, and I just don't believe it. And it's annoying because I like those movies. I remember seeing the second one with a group of friends, and we just came out and we were like, pew 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 pew. Anyway, we're not talking about Marvel movies. We're not talking about DC movies.
So I was only talking about them to say there was a point where there was a time when the lesser sort of characters could come to the fore, or even non-characters. And so
go on, Dean, what's your first pick?
My first pick is not even a comic book character. Does not exist in a comic book.
Well, that's controversial. Bear in mind, that's the topic of this podcast, Dean.
So, Sam Raimi, who made those Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
And he was now famous for making those 3 Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire, and is set to release another superhero movie with Doctor Strange and
Multiverse of Madness.
Multiverse of Madness. He wanted to create, I think, a Batman movie back in the day, back in the 90s. And he's a very dark sort of director. Like, my first introduction to Sam Raimi was the Evil Dead movies. Absolutely loved those, watched them to death. You know, any time that me and my friends would get together as teenagers, we would probably watch one of the Evil Dead movies, usually Evil Dead 2, sometimes the first one. And it was this thing for like dark directors were really trying to, like, in the 90s, like even Tim Burton was trying to make a Superman movie. He got, and Nicolas Cage was going to be in it with a mullet. But Sam Raimi wanted to create a Batman film, I think. Doesn't matter if I'm wrong about this because nobody listens to this podcast. So I'm going to say it with authority now. Sam Raimi wanted to make a Batman movie. Fact. But was cut down, and they said, "No, you're not going to make a superhero movie. What you're talking about? You do not have access to our IP, our intellectual property." So it's like, right, screw you then. I'm going to make my own superhero. I'm going to have Liam Neeson in, and I'm going to call it Darkman.
Oh, Darkman. Nice.
You've seen Darkman?
Then. Yeah, I have. Not a long time ago. I haven't seen that for a long time.
So it technically isn't a comic book movie because it's its own creation, I think. This is where, like, it is based on something. But as far as I'm aware, it was a creation born out of the fact that he couldn't have access to the IP for legitimate superheroes. And it is absolutely batshit crazy.
Yeah, that's my overriding memory. I 20 years I reckon I haven't seen this, so
it's got like a sort of Liam Neeson's in it, and it's got this sort of a little bit like the first Batman movie with Tim Burton, with like the Joker falling into the vat of the of acid or whatever. You have this character whose face is like basically fucked, and he's got the technology where he can basically like print any face, and is the master of disguise. But it only lasts for a certain amount of time, and so like bandaged up and stuff like that, so he can be like the master of disguise and things like that. And there's a weird scene, and he's got like enhanced abilities. There's a weird scene, like, look it up, dear listeners. We'll put a link to it in the description of this podcast. So please click into the link in the description of Liam Neeson in Darkman, trying to win a fairground toy. It is absolutely insane. It's the most mental thing you'll ever see in a movie. It is absolutely mental. It just, like, I don't know. I can't explain it. Just watch it. Click the link in the description. So Darkman is my like outsider pick. My insider pick of a character that I am well aware is a legitimate comic book character. And this film isn't great, but I can remember when I watched it at the time, I thought it was awesome. And it is Spawn.
Spawn. Wow, left field, Dean.
Yeah,
I like it. You know what? I've never seen it. Genuinely, never seen it. No, I've. No. It's a property I'm aware of, and I know it's. Yeah, McFarlane's the name of the guy who's created it, but I can't remember his first name. But yeah, no, I'm aware of Spawn. I kind of know it. It's like Spawn of the Devil, right? Is that the kind of general gist of it?
He makes a deal with the devil so he can sort of live on and stay with his wife or whatever. And then when he comes back to Earth, his wife's married his best friend or something like that. And he ends up being like the lieutenant of like Satan's armies and stuff. But then he turns his back on and like becomes like a sort of switches sides and becomes like a sort of force for good, fighting against the devil and things like that. And he's just got this like hideous face, but like awesome like armor, and the CGI in this movie has not dated well, but at the time it seemed fine. You know, stuff like cloth, like capes that were CGI capes that could morph into different shapes and stuff like that. At the time, it seemed completely photoreal. You watch it now, and it looks like something that was like from the very first like PlayStation in the 90s or whatever.
It probably is. I mean, what's that like? I think I have like a weird thing where I like know like years films were out. I think it's like 98. I think Spawn was,
It makes sense. I think it was around the time I was definitely in secondary school. I can remember it was the kind of thing that we would like. I was talking about with people like, "Have you seen Spawn?" And I don't know. It was very dark as well. You know, hellfire and deals with the devil and disfigured faces and weird looking clowns. There's like this whole thing. Like, I know like clowns are supposed to be scary, but like there's like the basically like agent of the devil is like this weird like clown figure. That I don't know. He looks like Danny DeVito. I don't know if it was Danny DeVito or no, but he looks exactly like him.
No, I genuinely, I don't have really a connection with this property. I'm aware of it, and I just kind of like, it's one of those things I've just never kind of got into. There's like people that are like mad for Spawn. Like, it's one of those properties that, you know, that has like an underground following, much like one of the properties I'm going to talk about. But yeah, just I like the figures. I used to work in a comic book shop. You know, I'm not going to lie, but I used to work, and there used to be a figurine of the Spawn character, and it was always like, it's a fucking great design. It really is. It's a good design. Yeah. It looks amazing. And you know what, Dean, I might follow up on this. I might try and find 1998 Spawn film and catch myself up, because I feel like I've missed out on this.
It's temper yourself, because
it's fine. It's 24. It's 24 years old. I'm getting it. I understand. It's not going to be great.
But I later on, there was like listening to like metal and stuff in the 90s and early 2000s. There was a lot of like the heavy thrash and like power metal stuff that I was listening to quite a lot. And there was a band called Iced Earth who did a concept album based around the Spawn story. And it's called Dark Saga, the album is called. And
I own the album. I did not know that was a thing.
It is. It's about Spawn. It's all about Spawn, and there's like a song on it called Heaven something. Anyway, it's the thing is about, it's a pretty cool song, and the reason how I sort of got into that, listening to that band back in the day, was like I was a big, as we both are, big fans of Blind Guardian, the German band, which is sort of a cross between, I don't know, for those of you who haven't heard Blind Guardian, they're like Queen but metal, I guess.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. It's very much, they've got a couple of Queen covers in their back catalogue, but they're along our lines. They've got an entire album about, like, you know, Middle Earth, and they're like that. They're nerdy guys. Yes. They know their things, and yeah, no, it's hard to describe. If anybody listening to this is not aware of German power metal, by all means, check it out. Check out Halloween. Check out Gamma Ray. Check out Blind Guardian. Check out Ed Guy.
Gravedigger.
Yeah, you know what? They just take that leap. We are probably power metal fans. Definitely previous power metal fans.
The earlier stuff that is very much like a cross between Judas Priest mixed in with Rainbow, mixed in with like Iron Maiden, like the Halloween Gamma Ray stuff. I think definitely if you like classic rock, then that sort of stuff was like a continuation of that, where everything else at that time, where everything else was like grunge and starting to go into like the hair metal stuff. Like when Halloween were putting out like Keepers of the Seven Keys and stuff like that. Sounds like something that like would come out, you know, by like Iron Maiden or Rainbow or Queensryche and stuff like that. You know, things were moving into, you know, Motley Crue territory and almost into like Soundgarden territory at the time. So, yeah, we like that kind of stuff, and it formed a basis of not only our friendship, but like our music as well. You hear it in our music.
Dean, well, let me just interject there. This is a music podcast. This is a nerdy podcast. Bring it back to reality, man.
I've got one more, but do you want to go first?
I'm gonna go back to the 90s as well. I've got a main one I want to talk about. I'm gonna park that for now and come to The Crow.
Oh, yes.
Now, The Crow, if people aren't aware, was a film in the early to mid 90s with the son of Bruce Lee, who we talked briefly about in the last episode, Brandon Lee. And he died on the set of this movie. This series is cursed. He died on that, and then there was a second one, and someone got injured in that, and this whole series is if you want to look up The Crow curse, by all means Google that, because it's a long. We could have a whole podcast about that. I don't know enough about it, but
I think like in the current climate with the thing that happened with your man,
Alec Baldwin.
Yes, a similar thing happened to Brandon Lee with something to do with a blank going fire mishap, I think. Really sad as well. And I think it sort of tragically mirrored what happened with Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee never got to see like the success of Enter the Dragon. And same with Brandon Lee with The Crow. Just before you crack on with talking about The Crow, we talked in the last episode about movies. We should definitely do an episode on movies that have terrible sequels that don't have any of the original cast. And you talked about some of the sequels there in your like introduction to this. Have you ever seen The Crow City of Angels, which is a sequel to this movie?
Once. That is the reason why.
I think it was like, you know, when you used to be able to go to HMV and they had like 3 movies for $10 or something.
Yeah, man.
This was one of the movies that I picked up on DVD. And replacing Brandon Lee's character was the kid out of Terminator 2.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
And he had eyeshadow on and looking all emo and like punk. And one of the main bad guy's henchmen in this movie was none other than car insurance salesman himself, Iggy Pop. A really bad movie. So The Crow, it's great. It's got a cult following.
Yeah, I know
loads of people
Absolutely.
love this movie.
Funny enough, I was talking to a little bit like The Matrix. There was an element of the population. I want to talk about angry
who wear
young
trench
men.
coats, black leather trench coats.
100%. I was very much in school around the time the Crow. I would have been around about 13, 14 when this movie came out, and the black leather trench coat was very much a feature. The black eyeliner, you know, the smudged black eyeliner. I remember that being a part of people's persona. I mentioned this to my wife earlier, and she, Helen, she just went, I was like, oh yeah, you know, it became the whole persona, and she's like, no, they had no persona. That was all it was. It was just empty. And I was like, whoa. But yeah, no, absolutely right, 100%. And like, I am not gonna lie. After The Matrix came out, I did buy a long coat. I'm not gonna lie.
I think a lot of people did. But what happened was usually somebody bought one of those coats after The Matrix came out, and they would pop it on, and they would go around to the mate's house, or they would go out or whatever, and then that would be the last time they would ever wear it.
No, I'm not gonna lie, Dean. I've worn that coat that I bought for The Matrix on stage for our band. It's fine. It's a costume now. It's all good. But anyway, so getting back to The Crow. The Crow's great. The Crow is basically like it's quite dark. It's quite similar to Darkman you were talking about before, and it's kind of spurred me on about that. It's quite a dark film. There's, you know, basically Brandon Lee's character, Eric. That
yes, something like Eric Craven or Draven or something like that.
Yeah, Draven. Yeah, he dies, and basically gets brought back as the Crow, this kind of character, and he's like floating around. And at some point, he says like, very similar to what we were talking about a couple of episodes about the Batman thing, where the Batman and Catwoman say that phrase about the you know, there's a phrase, and it's something about rain and I can't remember the exact phrase, but anyway, there's themes. It's very much based in the early 90s. It's very dark. It's very kind of grungy. There's elements of, if it was filmed, you know, in the Daredevil area a few years later, it would have had an absolute banging new metal soundtrack.
Yeah, it would have had music by Static X.
Yeah, and very early, you know, and maybe Cold Chamber, you know what I mean? It's that kind of era.
Yeah. It was, but it didn't, because it was like it had this. It was very atmospheric. There was a lot of fog, cinematography, like light shining through the fog and stuff
Genuinely,
like that.
genuinely, it's a good film, and I haven't seen it in a while, but I would say that it's probably a lot of the films from this era don't stand up. A lot of the films from this era are not great, but I would happily sit down and watch The Crow, I think, and maybe I'll be disappointed. Maybe I will. I'm not sure, but
I think it taps into that sort of time. If you like, at the time this movie came out, or like even afterwards, if you watch this movie when you are a teenager and you are into alternative music and that sort of aesthetic, and it taps into that aesthetically anywhere. And then he is like a rock star sort of persona. The only scene that I can remember from my memory, and again, I haven't seen it in years and years and years and years and years and years and years. Probably haven't seen it in like nearly 20 years. It's like he's playing like a guitar, like on like a rooftop during like a full moon or something, like playing a solo, like mournfully or whatever, you know, shredding it like Steve Vai sort of thing. A bit hammy, but it's got that sort of, going back to like well-known franchises again, it's got that sort of Tim Burton Batman sort of feel.
absolutely
And
has.
the way that he like sort of comes down and like drops in, and then but the way he speaks to the guys is very like almost Batman villainy. He almost like speaks to them in like riddles, like the Riddler, like almost speaking like Edgar Allan Poe sort of like stuff to them, and he get this element of unhinged about him, almost like Spawn, like an anti-hero.
Absolutely. No, I say it's a film of its era, and I say I haven't seen it in a while, but I when I was looking for the inspiration for comic book movies, I have fond memories of watching this movie, and I say I definitely have memories of people that maybe got a little bit too much on board. Definitely, as I said, we talked about The Matrix a couple of times, but The Matrix is a film where people they went balls deep in that boy. And a Crow was a decade earlier, and it definitely had the same kind of vibe.
Let me tell you, I got 4 words for you: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Holy fucking hell. All right, I'm ready for this conversation. Let's go, motherfucker.
Heroes in a half shell. Turtle power.
Turtle power indeed.
I know that it was a massive big sort of craze and stuff like that when it came out and stuff. And talked in the Christmas podcast about like when I was a kid, I was obsessed with like Ghostbusters, and one Christmas I got all the Ghostbusters toys, including the ones that can set fire to your carpet. I had the jumpers, I had the jumpsuits, I had the VHSs, you know, I had the like stuff. And then the next thing that I massively got into was these green turtles.
I'm gonna tell you a fact now. I was the prime age and the prime thing, and the turtles totally. I was not allowed any of it because my mum and dad were not on board. I got nothing. I got no t-shirts, no thing. I got nothing. So this to me is a story of pain. But please, by all means, tell your story.
I don't want to like relive your pain, and I don't want to be like bad mouthing on your like parents. But was it because it was like, so like for my kids, like I can remember like being like that about like big franchises and stuff, like all this Peppa Pig stuff and things like that. And then sometimes it's just like, oh no, all this stuff is just like plastic and stuff like that.
No. It was totally the violence thing. I wasn't.
Violence
yeah,
thing?
my mum and dad. God bless them. We were quite Methodist in the early 90s. And I was quite Methodist for a little while, but not so much. Turtles really wasn't a thing in my childhood. Star Wars was fine.
I had the lot. I tell you what, I even had a plastic table that had like turtles on it. I had like green pizzas. I had the toys that you could wind up and they would like spin around. One time when my dad was in hospital in the northeast, we stayed at a house in Concert in the northeast, and my granddad took me to a toy shop, and the one thing that I was desperate to get, I'd wanted this toy for ages. Right?
It was the Turtles blimp, wasn't it, Dean?
It was a Turtles blimp. Yes. Can you remember this toy?
Yeah, oh my god, yeah. It was the one toy everybody wanted. 100%.
I wanted it for Christmas. I didn't get it for Christmas, right? And I didn't get it. And I just remember thinking I didn't get the Turtles blimp. And my cousin Tom, he had the Turtles blimp. I knew he had it. He talked about the Turtles blimp. I'd never seen it, but when we were both visiting around my nan's house, and he was showing me how his cryptic Transformers car could turn into the thing, and I could never get it to work, and he was telling me about the Turtles blimp. I was thinking, I wish I had the Turtles blimp, right? And so I knew he had it. And I didn't get it. And then, can you remember the TV show Noel's House Party? There was a bit in it where, like, the parents played the kids, right? And if the kids won, they got a toy. And I wrote to Noel Edmonds and said, can I be on your show because I want to win a Turtles blimp? And I got a reply from Noel Edmonds saying, sorry, we've already filmed all of the segments pre-recorded for the kids versus the adults. You will not be getting your Turtles blimp. So when I went to the toy shop and got this Turtles blimp, and I could not believe my luck, I finally had the Turtles blimp. It took 6 hours to inflate my mouth. And obviously that is just filled with carbon dioxide from human lungs. Did not, as my imagination predicted, fly.
Oh my god. Okay, so before you start talking about the films, I've got a story. It's kind of a confession-y story. So I wasn't very popular as a child. I used to bullshit a lot. One of my bullshit stories. I would have been in, oh god, what year would have this been in modern terms? I would have been in the second year of juniors. So that would be year 4. Year 4. So I'm year 4 child. I'm 7, 8 maybe.
Yeah.
Turtles is massive. I want to tap into that. I want to make friends. I tell all of my friends at school that I've got a contact who's in a contact within the Turtles world, and I looked in the credits of the Turtles program and picked a random name out of the thing and said, "Oh, that's my uncle."
Uncle Vanilla Ice.
No, it wasn't, mate. It was one of the big guys. It was one of the Foxes. If you look on the Turtles credits, it was like literally like one of the executive producers. And I said, "Oh yeah, I can get you some Turtles costumes." And I basically, as a year 4 boy at school, I took orders for the 4 turtle costumes from all of my school friends and promised them that we could deliver them and get turtle costumes for all the boys. That never materialized. I was a bullshitter. It was one of genuinely, I mean, that's like 30, 32, 33 years ago, and it still haunts me to this day. I wanted to make Turtles my thing. Embarrassing as hell.
Man.
Anyway, tell your movie story, man, because I'm on a right fucking downer right now.
I remember seeing this movie, and
can I just stop you there? I've never seen any of the films.
What?
Never seen any of them. I'm aware of all of them. I know the characters. I know that like
have you seen the
Corey,
the cartoons?
Yeah. I saw the cartoons. Corey Feldman played Michelangelo and all that shit. No idea. Never seen him. Never seen any of them.
All right. Well, the big thing at the time, I can remember like when they like obviously it was a huge movie because it was a huge IP. But I can remember watching like the documentaries at the time, and still blows me away. The animatronics on the like puppetry on the face of the turtles, you know, not driven by human mouth. There's like 5 or 6 people with different remote controls controlling different servos and different muscles in the face, and a complete performance. I just think that's fantastic, you know, just like performed live. There's no CGI, and there's no like even hand puppetry or like people like just speaking through a mask. It's these guys having to work like in tandem. Like one guy's twitching the nose, the other guy's moving the top part of the lip, the other guy's moving the bottom part of the lip and stuff like that.
Funnily enough, you just talk about that. There's there was a documentary I saw in the late 80s, and it was all about Return of the Jedi. And they used exactly the same kind of technology for Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi. You know, there was one guy that had the tail thing, and there was basically like a little guy inside. Sorry, what's the correct pronunciation? There was a little person inside Jabba the Hutt, working backwards and forwards on this big lever on his tail. But there was someone working the eyes, there was someone working the nostrils, there was someone working the tongue, and then there was basically a guy inside Jabba the Hutt moving his tongue around. So on a bigger scale, because obviously Jabba was like obviously life size, but I can totally understand that, like, you know, eight years later in the early 90s they were doing this for the Turtles. It's great.
Everything sort of had its same aesthetic in that time period. Like, I think you could cut together like a movie of scenes of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the movie and Crocodile Dundee 2.
Oh, and Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, and they would all like aesthetically without any color grading or like, you know, whatever you would think, they were happening in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, no, funny enough that, like, I'm thinking about the Goombas in Turtles. They're in Super Mario Brothers. They're very much the same technology that they used in the Turtles films.
Yeah, I don't know. There was a weird thing at the time. I don't know if it was this movie or it was the second Turtles movie, but Vanilla Ice did the like song to it.
Turtle Power.
Turtle Power, go Ninja, go Ninja, go. I was used to be a big fight between me and my brother about getting the toy inside the cereal. Remember when the cereal, when you don't get toys inside cereal anymore, but for a while they put them underneath, between the bag and the cardboard, so you just take the bag out and that. But before that, can you remember when they used to be actually in the cereal?
Yeah, they used to be.
And I can remember once, the first time I remember feeling utterly crushed in my life was when pouring out cereal in the morning, and my brother got like a Masters of the Universe figurine of like Skeletor or whatever from like a box of like Frosties or something, and then it's just like, where's mine? It's just like, there's only one. But one thing that I remember at the time with the Turtles was that song, the ninja song, that god awful song, right? It was you got it free with the box of cereal. I don't know what cereal it was.
Yes, you remember the CDs on the front of the cereal?
No, like it was a record. It was a vinyl record.
Vinyl,
a thin one that was stuck to the front, a tiny, thin vinyl thing that was stuck to the front of a cardboard of Frosties. Like, it was stuck to the front. You could have just like cut it out and not bought the like package, but you had to, like, after you'd finished with the cereal in the day, all your Frosties or whatever, you just take some scissors and cut it out, and you could plonk it onto a record player and play the song.
Tell me about the Turtles. What is it about this film that makes you mention it now, to be fair, Dean?
Because I don't have any like grounding in like comic book stuff. I didn't even know this was a comic book thing until about 3 years ago. I didn't realize it started off as like two guys like doing like a sort of grungy punk sort of like DIY comic book thing that was like really like alternative and a bit more like dangerous than everyone else. It was very like a punk sort of approach to creating these characters.
Genuinely, like, the cast of characters from this series was mental. So you've got like, obviously you've got the Turtles, which is weird, and then you've got like Master like Splinter, who's obviously a rat, and that's weird. And then you've got a Shredder, who's like a human guy, but then you've got Bebop and Rocksteady. That's weird. But what the hell is Krang? Like, he's genuinely like a brain with tentacles in the belly of a man with like so 90s, that design of like that goggle character.
You must have just like thought like at the time like there was similar stuff in Transformers like as well, where there must have been guys like in like suits with like shoulder pads just like doing lines and lines of coke, just coming up with this stuff, you know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, you're probably right.
Completely hyper real.
I think a segue from Turtles and that era is the comic book 2000 AD. And 2000 AD was mental. like genuinely mental. There's an insane amount of characters in there. There's an insane amount of stuff, but the one standout character from that is Judge Dredd,
of which there has been 2 movies.
There
now,
has.
yes?
2 very different movies. The first starring the old Sylvester Stallone in the mid-90s, very much hated by everybody who was connected with any kind of information or any kind of knowledge of Judge Dredd. And then the second one, starring old Éomer from Lord of the Rings, absolutely fucking amazing. Everybody loved.
Look, I knew you were going to say that.
Everybody fucking loved it. Everybody fucking absolutely fucking adores that film. Is there any money for the second one? Of course there fucking isn't. Anyway, so Judge Dredd is a property I don't have a great deal of connection with. I didn't read it as a comic. I have read Judge Dredd versus Aliens, which is a lot of fun. I have also looked at and enjoyed Judge Dredd versus Batman. There's lots of crossovers. But Judge Dredd, Sylvester Stallone, one, Judge Dredd never takes his helmet off. Sylvester Stallone was not on board with that, so he basically spends 90% of the movie without his fucking helmet on, showing his face. 2, the fucking cast of characters that is fucking atrocious. That quote, that I knew you were gonna say that. Fucking hell. Fucking what's her face Snyder.
Right, so like, I haven't read any of the comics, obviously, I've already established. Is that a thing from the comics?
No, 100%.
Why did they think that was a good catchphrase?
His catchphrase is "I am the law," which
well,
he
I know
does
that.
shout. And my God, Stallone's shout of that in the courtroom, "I am the law," is epic. I fucking love it. You know what? That should be a meme. I don't know why it should be a meme, but it feels like it should be a meme of saying "I am the law."
They should just have an infinite loop of like him shouting that, and then Jack Nicholson from Few Good Men shouting "You can't handle the truth," and just have those 2 clips playing back to back for hours.
So this has got the very feel. This is Stallone at his kind of late peak. You know, he's done Rocky, he's done Rambo. This is him. This is him post Demolition Man. This is him.
I was going to say he's done Demolition Man. He's gone, where can we go next?
Yeah, I like this film. I made Helen watch this film. She'd never seen it. I made Helen watch it, and I enjoyed it.
Cut it together with Super Mario Brothers and the other ones that we just talked about. It'll instantly aesthetically fit in as well. It has got that vibe too.
It's got the guy, the bad guy in this is like a rogue judge, and he's like typical bad guy. The big robot in this, the big robot thing that's like thing, love it. The gun that locks to his handprint, absolutely love it. The entire,
I remember that being cool.
The entire desert scene where he's out in the wasteland and there's the freaks and the thing, absolutely love it.
Let me tell you something. This film, I don't mind it either. But in a campy film like this, the last thing you need is extra comic relief.
You don't need Sid from Ice Age, do you?
No, you don't need, what's he called? What's the guy called? What's the actor
Thing
called?
is Schneider, isn't it? Wrong.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sid from Ice Age.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never seen that.
Have you never seen the Ice Age films? Ah, Jesus.
No.
That's things you need to watch with your kids. Like, but yeah, is it Roy?
Roy Schneider, yeah.
Yeah, him. I've got a funny
European
story.
Gigolo, man.
Yes. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, so my uncle and my auntie, they were quite straight laced. For some reason, they went to see that in the pictures, and they told me about it. Yeah, no, they're like 10 years older than my mum and dad, so they would have been in their 50s or 60s when they went to watch this. I think they got free tickets to the thing, and that was the film they went to. Anyway, that's not important. He's awful in this. But yeah, I actually, you know what? If this came on, I would absolutely sit and watch it. Stallone is watchable in this. Like he's watchable in Demolition Man. It's not as good as Demolition Man because Wesley Snipes in that film is the boy. But yeah, no, this is good. I like this film. But Dredd from this millennium, my God, what a film that is. That is unreal. Like, the fact that it's got Lena Headey in it from Game of Thrones and Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles, she's amazing.
Yeah, that was. I tell you what, that was a series that sort of went under the radar, which was actually quite good.
Yeah,
Sarah
absolutely.
Connor Chronicles.
Yeah,
I can remember that and being really into that, and it just sort of fell flat.
Yeah, and then the fact she ended up as like Cersei in Game of Thrones, and then she's the what's she a voice in? She's a voice in something recent as well. Anyway, but she's great. She's amazing, and I love her. And then it's got Domhnall Gleeson, who's
thing
in Star Wars. He's like the crackhead kind of tech guy in this. Oh, this film and oh god, what's his name? The main guy.
Carl Urban.
Carl Urban. My god, what a performance he puts into this film. Love it.
Carl Urban's just like, I think he flies under the radar. I think he's a very versatile actor. I mean, if you look at he's been in some big franchises, Obviously, he was Bones in the reboot of Star Trek.
It was, and he's great. And you know what? And I don't Defrost Kelly in the original Star Trek is great, but he is that
out of all of the rebooted characters of that, I think he managed to encapsulate the character without doing an impression, but also,
like the worst character thing in that is Simon Pegg trying to play Scotty.
Yes.
100%. I love Simon Pegg. I love Space.
Yeah, me too.
I love Space. I love all the films he did with Edgar Wright. I love all the stuff he's done. But that is a dog shit performance. If he's trying to play Scotty, it doesn't make sense.
I really don't think it's his fault. I think that it's just miscast,
But then he did the writing on the latter ones, and I actually quite like the last one. But I'd say that's a franchise that's dead, I think. But
yeah. So he was in that, and obviously he was in Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
As Eomer.
Yeah, he was.
And
Lord of the Horse.
He was in the Chronicles of Riddick thing, and obviously Judge Dredd.
I think the worst thing about it is that it's been a while, and there doesn't appear to be a sequel.
Yeah, it's not going to get a sequel.
No.
It'll be rebooted if surely it will. It's not like there's never going to be a Judge Dredd movie again. But they're not going to sequelize this.
No,
it'll be a different actor, it'll be a different story, it'll be a different production.
It's such a shame. It's a real shame, and I like maybe a future podcast films should have had sequels that never did. But yeah, this one feels.
But you know what it was? They tried to do after the success of that. I don't know if it's the same studio or whatever, but it must have had a bearing on it. They tried to do what they did with Judge Dredd with RoboCop. They tried to go down the same aesthetic and same route, and that fell on its arse, didn't it?
I did not watch that because I just didn't fancy it. Okay, my first exposure to 18 rated films was Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which traumatized me. The bit where Freddy pulls the guy's veins out of his arms and controls him like a puppet. That's not great, especially when you're.
How old were you when you watched that?
I was 9, maybe 10. Oh god, that's not the age to be watching that shit. Anyway, but I watched Chucky shortly after that. That's not great either. But my first exposure to kind of like action adventure kind of things was RoboCop 2. So I saw RoboCop 2 before I saw RoboCop, and that's ingrained in my psyche. I like that film. I watched it I watched it before I should have watched it. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I was probably 11 or 12 when I saw that film. But yeah, that's good. And then RoboCop 3 came out, and that was shit. But then they spun an entire television show off RoboCop 3, and then went back and did like a 4, 5, 6. That felt the new one. It just felt, why are you rebooting that? Why do you feel the need to even touch that? It just felt lazy. And they didn't give him a human hand. They were all like, they were both robot hands.
So maybe another possible. I mean, we're coming up in the last 2 podcasts with possible future episodes, but I think one that that we definitely should touch is movies that have spawned TV series. I think that maybe should be the next one we do after this one.
Okay. Or maybe we have a counterpoint to that of films that spawned unnecessary sequels. I think we talked about that in the past.
I can tie it together, I guess. But because the only reason I mention it is like there's been a few times when I was a kid where I thought I was getting a sequel to a movie, but in fact, when I went to the VHS video store, I was renting like season 1 of like a TV series of like Highlander.
I knew you were going to fucking mention Highlander. Yeah.
Do you know why? Because they always had Highlander 1 and they always had Highlander 3 and they never had the second one for obvious reasons because it's absolutely awful. But sometimes they had like a VHS of the TV series with like Duncan MacLeod. Got tricked into that before. Same with RoboCop.
Yeah, my God, that I remember watching that. Well, the whole we're way off topic here, but the whole purpose of RoboCop 3 was basically to introduce RoboCop with a jetpack, which then he would use in the TV show. Okay, cool. So, Dredd, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you haven't seen 1995 Sylvester Stallone Dredd, you know what? Fuck it, watch that as well. Right, I got one more, Dean. What you got?
Oh, you give me the last one.
Okay, well, it's kind of an era. I kind of want to talk about an era of comic book movies, and it's the very early 2000s. We get V for Vendetta, we get 300, and we get Sin City.
Mm-hmm.
It genuinely was the golden age of obscure, mainly written by the same guy, obscure
Frank Miller, yeah,
comic books turn into movies, and it carries on. You know, you get Edgar Wright doing Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and you get Watchmen, which I know has been rebooted into a TV show. But there's the early 2000s. It was like we've done X-Men, we've done Spider-Man, you know, we've tried Daredevil, you know, we've done the Batman, you know, the Christian Bale Batman's just around the corner. And it was like, what can we do? And it was literally like, let's do V for Vendetta, let's do Sin City, let's do thing. And I had no idea. I didn't know they were comics. But are they good films? Damn right they are. 300, scene by scene, is pretty much the comic book. V for Vendetta, I don't know, I've never read it, but V for Vendetta, that is still having, you know, V for Vendetta is permanently ingrained on the psyche of a certain section of our community. You know,
I think that you've hit on an interesting thing there, where there's with Sin City, definitely, and with 300, definitely, and to a lesser extent, V for Vendetta. They aesthetically try to seem like comic book panels. So for Sin City, they have the black and white monochrome thing with the red touches to insinuate sin and violence and things.
And the yellow man is bright yellow. It's
yeah. And it looks comic booky, and they have this sort of transition between almost like panels, you know, with the cuts. And 300, like you said, is very stylized in that way. And although V for Vendetta isn't really, it has that a lot of full frame black and white sort of stuff with the design of the characters lend itself to sort of hard outlines, I guess, which is very comic booky. The way that I've seen some stills of that comic book, and it is sort of that way. So that was an interesting shift to make things visually seem like they're from a comic book. And you're right as well, with Scott Pilgrim as well. They had all of the extra graphics and stuff, and they hark back to some of the Adam West Batman
absolutely
stuff
that's what I was about to say. It's very much the kapow, you know, the that kind of thing. It's just, I don't know, it's an interesting era of thing, and there's some great all four of those make a list on Google of, you know, comic book adaptations that work and are good and are revered. But yeah, it just there seems to be a turning point around about. I mean, I was at uni in 2003, same as yourself, and then there's a very element of 300 and like, you know, movie posters, the posters you put on your wall in your student flat. that was what we had. We had that, and we had Kill Bill, and we had, you know, that kind of era of stuff. It's just ultra violent. You know, we talk about Dread that came a little bit later, but there's a very much, every single one of those films is very ultra violent. It's very much I don't know. It's very different from the stuff from the 90s, which is
I think it's like almost the violence in these kind of movies, like especially 300, when you think about it. 300 and
Sin City.
Sin City. It isn't even ultra violent. It's like hyper violent.
Yeah.
So you instantly become desensitized to it because it is like comic book like violence. You know, it's like video game violence. You know, I think ultra violence, like up until that point, we sort of had been somewhat desensitized to it anyway, with like some of the big sort of movies, like, you know, in Braveheart and stuff, people being thrown to spikes.
And Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, and Mortal Kombat video games and stuff, you know, stuff like that, you know. And then stuff like this, you know, I was talking about Mortal Kombat the film, Dean. That's another episode in itself. Oh no.
Now we've done comic book and we've done time travel. Video game adaptations is definitely on the horizon, Dean. I'm just warning you now.
Can't believe we haven't even got to it before this one. Why we haven't done video game adaptations first? Because we've talked enough about every 10 minutes we've talked about Super Mario Bros.
Absolutely, we have. It's like our go-to.
I tell you what, right? We talk about a lot of like highbrow movies and stuff, and a lot of like critically acclaimed films, right? But I tell you what, after we record this, if I flick through the TV and Super Mario Brothers the movie is on, I'm gonna watch it. Right. So we talked about comic book movies. We've not talked about Superman. We've not talked about Batman. We've talked about The Crow. We've talked about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We're talking about Judge Dredd. We talked about The Phantom.
No, we haven't.
We didn't.
We didn't. We should talk about The Phantom. Billy Zane.
Right.
Did we talk about Billy Zane in a previous episode? Or were you talking about privately?
Let me just say about something. Last episode, I threw in a TV show. I threw in Quantum Leap as the wild card. I'm going to throw in a wild card here. And that is Defenders of the Earth, the TV show.
Defenders of the Earth. Defenders.
Holy hell, Dean. Wowzers. That is comic book gold right there.
Defenders of the Earth. I want to say, to hell with the Avengers, to hell with X-Men, to hell with the DC Extended Justice League, or whatever it's called. I want to see a movie of Defenders of the Earth is what I want to see. I want to see out of the sky, his rockets ignite, jet into battle like faster than light, Flash Gordon.
I'm right.
I want to.
I
want to see.
You know what? No.
Master of Magic Spells and Illusions is what I want to see.
You want to see Mandrake? No. You know what? Like the Billy Zane Phantom is terrible. It's not good. But the Phantom is it's such a part of my childhood. That character and like.
Wait, sorry, don't you mean the beast calling brother that goes to walks?
Damn right he is.
Phantom.
But no, that film is
Defenders of the Earth.
No, that's great. No, and the thing is they're facing off against Ming the Merciless.
Yes,
absolutely. You know what, Flash Gordon? Let's rewind this back. Let's pull this back. Flash Gordon is a great film. Like terrible like execution. It's late 70s. It's not good. The Queen soundtrack, I'm a big Queen fan. That's a great soundtrack. One, you've got Timothy Dalton as like the slimy kind of prince.
Yes, you do.
You've got
and Brian
Blessed. You've got Max von Sydow.
Yeah.
As Ming the Merciless. Just what a film that is. I don't know. Jesus Christ. That's a comic book movie, right?
Yeah, we know about Flash Gordon. We know about the Phantom with Billy Zane, but
Defenders of the Earth.
Forget all that. I want to see Defenders of the Earth, the movie.
Yeah, man.
With Lothar.
Yeah, why not?
And the others.
Why not?
But so for those of you who aren't aware, was it a comic book originally?
I've no idea.
Or was it But it was definitely a cartoon.
It was a cartoon of the very late 80s. It was around the time of Captain Planet and the Planeteers. It was the similar kind of era. It was post He-Man, post Transformers, similar time to Thundercats. Now, I know some amount of our listeners are in the 50s and 60s. They ain't gonna remember this. Go look it up. Defenders of the Earth, Flash Gordon, the Phantom, Mandrake, the Wizard, for some reason. Amazing.
Yeah, look it up. Your kids are gonna love it. 30 years ago.
There we go. That's the reference from last podcast.
Just go and look it up, and then next time you go around to your kid's house, just say, "Hey, here's what I deprived you of 30 years ago." It had Flash Gordon,
comic book character.
It had Phantom,
comic book character.
And he wore this purple thing with a purple thing with a mask, and he could do some ring magic power thing that could talk to animals and zap them and make them do what he wanted, I think, from my memory.
It was the ghost that walks.
The ghost that walks. Then there was Mandrake, who was the
master of magic spells and illusion.
He basically looked like a 70s
cheap magician.
Yeah.
A cheap magician.
With a top hat and a cape. You know what Edna says? She says, no capes. No capes, Dean.
And then Lothar, whose strength was a legend.
And then who were the kids? There was a kid this was Flash Gordon's kid. And then who was the other kid? There was another girl. There was a girl kid, wasn't there?
There was kids. In the song it was like, with our young heroes, something to know. For become eight, defending the earth.
And then there was a whole song about Ming the Merciless, wasn't there? Bit of a verse about Ming the Merciless. It was a great cartoon. Honestly, 80s cartoons. Defenders of the Earth. Okay, so we've been talking about comic books. Comic book movies that aren't DC, they're not Marvel. They're random. And Dean even brought one that wasn't even. Do you remember that? Right back in the day, Dean talked about a comic book character, wasn't even a comic book character, with your Darkman, with your Liam Neeson, you crazy cat.
There's always room for Neeson.
There is always room for Liam Neeson.
There's always room for Neeson. Always make room for Neeson. If there's one thing we've always said on this podcast, loyal listener, is make room for Neeson in your life.
Dean.
I think
we've literally never said
that. Every episode we have said that, Luke. I don't know if you know, but I've edited into the start of every episode. I know you don't listen back to these, but at the start of every episode, I mentioned something to do with Liam Neeson. A little fact for the listeners.
Awesome.
Our traverse across the realm of comic book characters has left us to this point where we sort of have reached the end of what we want to say. There's many more comic books. There's many more movies. I think the one thing that we could say about the ones we've talked about is that they are self-contained films. There is a big fad at the moment for having everything being interconnected in a big, all-in-spanning universe. Marvel have managed to execute it with huge commercial success. DC have been trying to desperately replicate it, I guess. And we even to the point now where
can we just give a shout out for Universal and the death of their Dark Universe, which never took off. Did you ever see The Mummy with Tom Cruise?
Didn't.
The Universal were trying to work as Dark Universe. They had Russell Crowe signed on to be the Jekyll and Hyde, and they had like big actors. They did a big press shoot where all the guys got together to say, we're going to be all in this big dark universe. They did The Mummy, and that's it. That's the only one.
Yeah.
Now, you know what I mean? It's crazy. And like, I can understand it. You can look at Marvel. Marvel have been doing this since 2009. Now I think Iron Man came out in 2009. Everybody wants to replicate that. Of course everybody wants to replicate that. They've had $5-6 billion movies. Of course you want to replicate that. But in reality, what you really want to do is you want to have a film from 2009 about blue people, which is basically a a copy of Fern Gully, and try and bring out films 13, 14 years later, having not filmed a film since Titanic. Come on, everybody. Come on. We've all got to get on board with those Avatar sequels. We've all got to get on board. There's 3 of them coming at least. Everybody's got to remember the blue people. Everybody's got to get on board. Everybody's got to remember that film from 2009. Literally, I'm not joking. James Cameron of Terminator and Aliens fame has devoted the last 13 years of his life to creating a sequel nobody wants to. And he's not only creating 1, he's creating 3. Why is that? Because he thinks he can replicate the Marvel success. It ain't happening. Nobody's gonna see that. And maybe half the people will see that Avatar sequel and go, you know what? I don't want to see any more flying fucking blue people. I'm not bothered. Who cares?
I want to just shout out to Luke for managing to pull in the animated movie Fern Gully into the denouement of this podcast.
Did you not know that Avatar was basically a copy of Fern Gully? Did you not know that?
Well, I did. I sort of I had previously made the connection. I think that Avatar would be immensely improved by Robin Williams freestyle rapping as an animated bat.
Absolutely.
I think also probably that animated movie was somewhat hot off the heels of Dances with Wolves as well.
Oh. Yeah, no, you're probably right. No, it's interesting. And I say it's like there is a Hollywood is always trying to chase the $1 billion movie, and that's a mistake. I think some of the films we've talked about, yeah, Tank Girl, or, Stallone Dread, maybe Darkman, they didn't make a lot of money. They
Well, I think one of the things about the superhero comic book movies that are made at the moment is they are devoid of risk. They are trying to replicate what is in vogue or successful. So, for a while after the Christopher Nolan movies, there was this view that superhero movies need to be dark
and gritty
and realistic, to be successful. So you ended up with stuff like Man of Steel, which didn't really fulfill anything, even in terms of either side of the camp, light-hearted or dark. It fell somewhere in the middle and was a bit confused. The Marvel MCU stuff, everyone trying to create interconnecting storylines. Back when people were making stuff like Darkman, Spawn, all those movies, there were risks, They were lone sort of movies in the big ocean of other films that were released, and they had to sort of sink or swim on their own merit. And some of them did. Some of them didn't, But here we are. And I think one of the biggest things about the film industry at the moment is very few risks are being taken, very few original stories, original characters, fresh ideas, No. And when there is something that comes along that's quite fresh and original, it absolutely explodes,
Yeah,
it's a shame.
There's a lot of reboots. There's a lot of recycled ideas. There's a lot of there was a period of maybe 4 or 5 years where every major movie that was released was an idea that had either been a TV show or a comic book or something. There was never, go back to 1999. We've just had a Matrix sequel just come out. I haven't seen it yet, but go back to that period, like 99, 2000. There was a lot of, original ideas, original movies. I'd like to see what the next Matrix film, in terms of original idea, original IP. I'd like to see what that is. I don't think I need to see. I'm not looking forward to another Star Wars movie. I'm not looking forward to another Star Trek movie. As much as I will probably go and watch them because I'm a nerd and I will, I'd like to see something new and see what's coming out. And I think comic movies are definitely along those lines. Are we going to pick a favourite one, or are we just going to agree that there are some great comic movies that aren't Marvel and DC?
I think we should now name this podcast.
Oh, well, I think we should call it Tango's great. I can't remember whether it's great or not. Go watch it now. No.
Could you imagine?
No, Dean, what we should call it is, it should be called, I knew you were going to say that.
I knew you were going to say that.
Comic book movies. I knew you were going to say that.
Okay, so thank you very much for listening to this rambling chat. Rest assured that the weird ending to this podcast and the general cascade into tangents and wild speculation is a condensed edit to what we actually spent hours talking about.
Yeah, it's very, very late, and we have consumed many, many whiskeys.
We are grateful for your support. We have been Gandalf's Fist, and you have been listening to Defenders of the Earth, the movie.
Out of the sky, his rockets ignite. Jets into battle, flying faster than light. Flash Gordon, Lord of the Jungle, the hero who stalks. The beasts call him brother, the goes to war. Phantom, Defenders of the Earth. Defenders, master of magic spells and illusion. Enemies crumble in fear and confusion.